Hey, folks, I will say a word about Chris Cornell's passing, okay? Yeah, I'll leave that. How's that, Richie? How's that? That one's for you. Okay. So the generation behind me is experiencing the loss of one of their greats. A lot of people, a lot of people consider Chris Cornell great, and his voice was a voice of that generation. Grunge was huge. I recognized Soundgarden's potential when I first heard them. I keep putting this dang CD away that I want to show. I recognize. Yeah, here it is. I recognized when the first time I heard the band. I heard the heaviness. I also recognized 3-inch CD. These are kind of rare. I also recognized the power of Chris Cornell's voice, although that wasn't what attracted me to the band. It was their riffs, it was their songs. But yeah, he's pretty young, and well, let me just share my thoughts. Okay, I'll just let them come out. So we understand that he committed suicide, and it's also known that he had depression, and it's also known that he suffered from addiction. I don't know where he was at with addiction these days. I have depression. It affects all of us differently. When you don't suffer from clinical depression as opposed to situational depression, it's hard for a person to understand, because it's not that you're depressed about something. It's a chemical imbalance. It can be maddening when you can't find a reason for feeling so bad. It can really be horrible when you have, on the surface, every reason to feel good and you don't. I can imagine this might be part of what was happening with Chris Cornell when he took his life. I saw Soundgarden early on, long time ago, in the 80s. And it was a wonderful show. It was at a small club. And I was impressed, I mean, they literally tore the roof off the place. The ceiling of the club. It was a really excited show, and at one point Chris started to stab the ceiling with the mic stand, and it started to break up, that kind of foam board or whatever, plasterboard, and it started to break up and come down, and the next thing you know, the audience gets into it, and the place just became a mess. It was an amazing show, so I made sure I hung out. I made sure I met them. That was on my agenda, was to meet them and say what I thought. But I hung out, which is, it's easy to do when you're a musician. Once you get to talking to other musicians, it's easy to hang out if you're not full of bullshit. Of course, you can do it too when you're full of bullshit. In hindsight, and even then, I noticed how Chris was already suffering from the lead singer syndrome. He could already tell, I think some of the other band members could tell what was coming, that they were headed for bigger things business-wise. And while the band were fun and pretty cool, Chris wasn't, I won't say he was a jerk. What I would say is I was able to experience him wrestling with his role as the lead, the frontman of a band, and how a lot of times the adulation and the energy that people are pouring out at a band gets directed at the singer, and how that messes with your head. So Chris wasn't being a jerk. He was dealing with what was happening in his head, which was probably exploding at the time. I know what it feels like to have a good show. You feel like you're on top of the world. You feel larger than life. You really feel special. And it was quite a show. So, I was sharing that with the band, but I could see that it was messing with Chris. So a lot of people are in disbelief and not understanding that he could have committed suicide. I, however, can fully understand, which is why mental illness is not understood and not dealt with properly in our country. It's not even recognized by a lot of insurance companies. It's real. So I think that's the main thing that I have to share, is that, rest in peace, Chris. Recognized that for many fans of their music, he was a giant. And I also want to reach out to people to try to get a deeper understanding about mental health issues. Life is more mysterious and deep than many people think it is. It's not just what's on the surface. You've got to go below the surface. Things are not what they seem, and it's a complete myth to think that just because you have the things that we associate with success, that you have to be happy. It's just not that way, and it happens time and time again. And yet, people who stand outside of it don't understand. Maybe this will help some understand more. You never know what's going on inside of a person. Even though Chris was married and has kids, no one knows what he was feeling and thinking inside. Rest in peace, Chris.